Hey guys, Jesse Newell, KU beat writer here. It's no surprise, this is my favorite guest of the entire year, every single year. Ken Pomeroy, the founder of KenPom.com, an advanced stats expert. We go over why he likes KU so much in his preseason rankings, or why his numbers do, that is. Why the Big 12 is still rated at the top. Some surprise teams in the Big 12, why West Virginia is rated so high, and then we'll get to some other discussions, including the Elam Ending. He disagrees with me on that, and then also what he likes about college basketball and some of the things that he would like to see fixed, before also talking about his new podcast that's out there. So stay tuned for this conversation with my favorite guest, Ken Pomeroy. Happy to welcome back on the Sports Beat KC podcast my favorite guest, as most of you know, Ken Pomeroy, the founder of KenPom.com. Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jesse. It's great to be back on the podcast. It means the season's around the corner, so things are pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was great. And actually, I went to contact you through Twitter, and what was great about that is I pulled up some of our old messages, and I don't know if you saw the same thing, but there was one from a few years back where I said, let's see, let me pull it up. It was something to the effect of, hey, at lunch today, Bill Self said he believed that Ken Pom was my idol. I laughed and told him it was the truth. So it was bringing back good memories back from when I went ahead and looked up our old messages, and that really is the truth. That's a true story that has happened at the Allen Fieldhouse media room. So that's something that's good to know, I guess. That coaches now know that you're out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know what's more of an honor, that I'm your idol or that Bill Self dropped my name. It's close call.
Yeah, it probably both of them. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Big 12. We're going to talk about Kansas and your preseason rankings that just came out this week, Ken. And I guess we'll start with Kansas. A lot of people and a lot of the rankings out here have Kansas at number one, so I don't think that's much of a surprise. I've seen it with Basketball Times, AP. A lot of different ones out there have KU number one, but when I pulled up your preseason rankings and saw the adjusted efficiency margin on there, Kansas is number one by a pretty good margin. So I just wondered if you could take us through that and what you see from the numbers with Kansas, and why is it that your system not only has Kansas number one, but has Kansas number one by a pretty good margin?
Yeah, I mean, the system, first of all, it's kind of built with a lot of inertia in it. So, if you're a program that has been really good the last 3 years, you're probably going to be ranked really well in the preseason, unless you've just, your roster's been decimated or you had a coaching change or something like that. So when it comes to like the baseline that we start with, like Villanova has the best baseline coming into this year, having finished number one in my ratings 2 of the last 3 years and second the other year. But after that, it's like a close call, I think, between Kansas and UVA for like second. So Kansas already starts at a pretty high spot, and then they obviously have some losses from last year, but they're bringing back a decent amount of production, and then they're also adding 2 impact players in Lawson and Grimes, and so you just add that on to kind of like a very high baseline, and no other team can really match that heading into this season. The other typical teams with the good recruiting classes like Duke and Kentucky obviously have losses in their lineup, and their baseline isn't as strong, particularly Kentucky. So it's it's a little bit of a perfect storm for Kansas. It's rare for a team that has had the success they've had in recent seasons to be bringing back some guys and also be adding some quality players as well.
Yeah, you kind of spoke to it too, but it's sort of fascinating, the roster building that happens with this Kansas team, because you can talk about a Duke, a team that's built on freshmen, or Kentucky. You could talk about a Nevada or a Villanova that's built on 3 and 4 year players, and you can talk about a team like Nevada that's built on let me go back. Gonzaga and Nevada built on transfers. Villanova built on 4-year players, but KU kind of has that nice mix of all of them, where you can look at them and say, hey, they've got some 3 and 4 year guys, they got some talented freshmen, McDonald's All-Americans, and they got some big time transfers. So they kind of combine all those things into one, and you can kind of see why they might be the favorite with some of these sorts of rankings, not only the human ones, but maybe the computer ones as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's always I don't think people quite appreciate how difficult it is to kind of prognosticate at the beginning of the season and how much uncertainty there is. But, certainly if there is a safe choice for a team to be a 1 seed at the end of the season, it seems like, Kansas leads the way right now.
Let's go into the two factors too that you have on here. The adjusted offense, the adjusted defense, and I think the number that surprised me the most wasn't Kansas number one, but that projected defense is number one for KU. So can you take us into maybe some behind the scenes with that? What all goes into that number, and what do the numbers like about Kansas heading into this year, especially when it comes to the defensive end?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Obviously, given the down year that Kansas had defensively last season. But really, it's kind of similar ingredients. Essentially the preseason ratings are separate models, basically models for the offense and models for the defense.
Mm-hmm.
So even though Kansas didn't have necessarily a great year last year, the previous two seasons are pretty good, and you still have those principles of bringing a lot of guys back and basically. Having the two impact players, but also the defensive rating is actually influenced by the previous year's offensive rating.
Mm-hmm.
So typically teams that have that large disparity, that disparity will close up. So with Kansas being fifth in offense and 47th in defense, they're probably not going to have that disparity this year. That should even out a little bit more. And so the defense is almost surely going to be significantly better. Whether it'll be first or not, it's hard to say. But the interesting thing about the ratings is the preseason ratings, they tend to not deviate too much. You tend to not see an imbalance in a lot of forecasts, simply because it's kind of hard to distinguish hey, is this team going to be just really super offensive dominant or super defensive dominant? It's really hard to predict that at the beginning of the year. And so I'm surprised as well that actually ranked number one ahead of Virginia, but. It stands to reason that they should have a top 10 defense given all the talent that they have on the roster.
Yeah, it's going to be a different year for them, and it's crazy to think that last year, the worst rebounding team that Bill Self has ever had, unquestionably at Kansas, and this honestly could be the best one. I mean, you look at the changeover, and you add to Udoka inside, you have Dedrick Lawson, you have KJ Lawson, you have David McCormack in there, and then you add maybe Quentin Grimes who can do some things. So yeah, I could definitely see how this team could get back to some of those defensive dominating teams by Bill Self. But as you said, I was a little surprised for a Virginia, where you just think of them as defensive minded, and if we're looking at this, KU's at 87.2, Virginia's at 87.3. You mentioned it. This is a preseason ranking. This isn't going to be exact. You're doing the best with what you have here. Still surprising, though, because for Kansas, if that sort of thing happens, if KU is a top 5 defensive team, wow, I really think this could be a special season for them. I mean, not that people aren't thinking that already. I thought I picked them preseason number one, but I still had some questions about their defense. But if they can guard that well, then you really could see a team that would be favored maybe in every single one of their games.
Yeah, which kind of I got to kind of take a sidetrack here and just mention the awkward situation that I might be in after opening night. Obviously, Kansas being rated so well, and obviously the preseason ratings carry an enormous amount of weight very early in the season. So. If Kansas were to lose to Michigan State, they would still probably be rated first, unless they lose by a lot. They'll still be rated first in my system and be 0-1. So hopefully the Jayhawks can pull that out and at least save me a little bit of embarrassment early in the season.
Well, that's all right, Ken. It kind of changes the way I do rankings, honestly. It's my second year doing the AP poll, and from using your rankings and looking at computer ones like Sagarin, and then Bart Torvik has some interesting ones over at his site too. It just kind of changes the way you think about basketball, and I'm sure you probably do this as well, but for me at least, I kind of think of things more on a spectrum, and I know I got called out on Gary Parrish's poll attacks in the very first week last year. I'd have to remember the game. I know West Virginia was in it. It was the game over on the Germany Air Force Base, but it was Texas A&M versus West Virginia,
yep.
and West Virginia, if I remember right, just got ran out of the gym. It was like a 3 a.m. game. And so I think I had West Virginia preseason 10 and A&M 20, and I was one of the highest on A&M, and it was one of the few games that happened that week. And so the next poll I had West Virginia 13 and A&M 15. And immediately poll attacks, and immediately people saying, "What the heck are you doing? You're an idiot. What they just won the game, by 20 whatever. How could you have them ranked behind them?" And again, for me, it's just hey, these games are one sample out of 100 that could have happened, and sometimes things go bad. Sometimes things don't go your way, but I just can't let the head-to-head get in my head, if that makes any sense, by one random sample when we know it's going to be 30, 35 games down the line. I don't know how much attention, probably not much, Ken, that you pay to football, but right now, for example, Texas is ranked ahead of Oklahoma in almost every single poll, when in the computer polls it's the complete opposite, and it just kind of drives me crazy because it's like I know Texas beat Oklahoma, but 8 weeks into the season, we don't have to be using that head-to-head like it's gospel because it was one result and it was a 3-point game. So I'll step off of my soapbox, but do you kind of find yourself at the same thing? Like you said, maybe not cheering for Kansas, but sort of cheering for Kansas so that you don't get this list of 500 emails going to you to say, hey, you're the biggest city in the world. Why is Michigan State not above Kansas here?
Yeah, I mean that happens. That's going to happen anyway. Somewhere in the list of 353 teams that will happen early on in the season. My only other pet peeve with the rating, the AP polls that you're talking about a case where West Virginia, they play a quality team like that first, that opening night or whatever it was, the first couple of days, and like the other teams behind them have probably played bye games or whatever that they didn't challenge themselves, and so like West Virginia for playing a tough team, if any of those other teams that played Texas A&M, they might have lost as well, and just so West Virginia by challenging themselves, they get penalized and get dropped down the poll, and these other teams that could have played a non-D1 end up moving up. And that's another thing that kind of bugs me early in the season.
Yeah, it was fascinating. West Virginia was a crazy sample case last year because I'm sure you remember, so they lost that first game, and then they go on this unbelievable run. Yet in your rankings and a lot of the advanced ones out there, they were still kind of in that 7 to 12 range. So it went from the whole range of I got poll attacked for having West Virginia way too high at 12, and then like they were number 2 in the nation for 1 week, and I still had them at like 7 or 8, and I had West Virginia people coming at me. So it's just funny, kind of the range of emotions that you go through with all these numbers. But I found it really fascinating. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, go check out the Ken Pom podcast. It's brand new. You guys have been doing a great job on it. I really enjoyed listening to it and kind of what goes through your head and some of the things that you research. But you mentioned some of the things that pop in your head with that, but I really like the discussion on why the NCAA tournament system and the system that they use with the quadrants is going to be inherently unfair no matter really what system you use with it, and because it's rewarding mostly the wins at the top and the losses at the bottom, but those mid-level wins are kind of thrown away. So I kind of feel like we're kind of getting at a deeper discussion here, but sometimes that is what I feel like when I'm sort of relying on these overall rankings, and I'm trying to do my best to make sure I take all data into account rather than just cherry picking the best wins and they didn't beat anybody on this end, but really computers can do this better than we can, and so I guess at the end of the day we're just trying to do the best we can and try to give teams proper credit for what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some things that humans can do better, and honestly, like what I wish the AP poll was, and this is not going to happen, but I wish it was people like evaluating who the best team was, because I do think humans are better at watching teams play and seeing potential in teams, better than a computer can at this point. But in terms of evaluating results and trying to simulate all the results that go on and properly evaluating home and road, which people voters in the AP poll tend not to do, and valuing those wins over the 50 to 100 teams or the 100 to 200 teams, especially road wins. That's something that certainly the humans on the selection committee inherently struggle with and tend to, disregard. I think to me, the simplest way to think about the selection process is, the committee's basically looking at, your 5 best wins and your 5 worst losses, and that's about what it comes down to. And if you're not playing any teams in the top 50, your 5 best wins are not going to look very good, and your 5 worst losses are going to look really bad. And that's why teams that tend to dominate conferences with good, kind of mid-level competition tend to not get as much consideration as they deserve.
Let's get to this right now, Ken, because I know this is a discussion point, and this is something you have to sort of explain every year too. Kansas is overwhelming number 1 team in your preseason rankings. Kansas, if you go to their schedule page, which you can do by subscribing to kenpom.com, we'll have more on that later. kenpom.com is where you can subscribe. But if you go down, I'm on the page right now, Ken, and as far as I can scroll, there are W's on KU's page. Okay, so every game has a W next to it saying they are the projected winner. You go to the bottom, KU's projected record is 24-6 and 14-4 in the conference. So let's go ahead and make that distinction now, because I know people, and this is going to happen, they're going to see those W's, they're going to count them all up, and they're going to say, Ken Pom says that KU is going undefeated this year. That's not how the numbers work, but so go ahead and just give us a quick primer of what's going on there and why 24-6 at the bottom. What's happening on your projection page there?
Yeah, so the six losses basically accounts for the possibility of upsets, which will inevitably occur. I mean, we know this because no team has gone undefeated in what are we up to now? 42 years.
A long time.
Yeah, a long time, and there's undoubtedly been teams in Kansas' situation that were favored in all of their games. Although, the game at Kentucky is probably a little iffy, and there may be a game ultimately in the Big 12, road game that they're not favored in, but they're going to be favored in the vast majority of their games, if not all of them. And there's been teams like that before, and they obviously all failed and lost. So basically, you think about it. I think the simple example is, a really exaggerated example, but you play 10 games and you're a 51% favorite in those 10 games. The chance of you going 10-0 in those games because you're just barely a favorite is actually very, very slim. So even though you're a favorite in all those games, you're definitely not going to go 10-0 in them, and you're actually most likely to go 5-5 because you're just a slim favorite, and a 49% underdog is going to beat you 5 out of 10 times. So it's basically accounting for that principle, and when you go through all the probabilities and take all the gimme games and take all the relatively difficult games, based on the data I have, Kansas is most likely to lose 6 heading into the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah, and to speak to that too, KU's schedule is loaded. I mean, compared to some of the other Power 5 teams out there, KU normally plays a tough schedule, but yeah, just going up and down this, Michigan State, Marquette, your schedule doesn't have Tennessee in there yet, but if KU wins and Tennessee wins in the NIT, those two will match up. Villanova at home at Arizona State, which we know the road games are tougher because they're true road games, and then the Big 12 slate, which transitions me nicely to the Big 12. Ken, you have been a proponent. You have spoken to this more than anybody else in recent years, how the Big 12, we all know Kansas has been dominant. We all know that the narrative out there is that this Big 12 can't be very good because Kansas wins it every single year. But we look again at your rankings this year in the preseason ones, and it seemed like KU once again the Big 12 once again is a step ahead of the other conferences when it comes to the average ranking. So are you ready to go out and proclaim again that the Big 12 is most likely going to be the best conference again this year, despite the fact that KU has a great chance to win it?
Yeah, that's always the hard one to debate, I think. It is a little weird that, a conference where one team is continually winning it could be considered the best. But you look at the average rating of all the teams. It's been 4 years running now that the Big 12 has been the top-rated conference in my system. And as I said, the ratings have some inertia built in. So, I mean, naturally, when you see a conference has been the best 4 years in a row, it's going to spit out that it's going to be the best, this year. The ACC could catch it. It wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, the ACC I think is stronger at the top, but it's always like it's just such a hard comparison to make because the ACC has 33% more teams. So, obviously they're going to have more good teams. They're also going to have more teams at the bottom that are bad. So it's always challenging to compare conferences. And I think that's one of those things too, that a computer is probably, better suited to do than a human. Like just, tell me what your criteria is for judging a conference and let the computer, do that for all 32 conferences and we'll figure out which one's the best. But yeah, I mean, I do think the Big 12 is the favorite to ultimately finish number one in my system. But, like I said, I think the ACC is close, and it wouldn't surprise me if they flip-flop this year.
Yeah, well, and you look at the preseason ranking, at least for the Big 12 teams, 1, 10, 12, 16, 25, 26, 34, 40, 52, 62. So even people thinking, Oklahoma State might have a down year, maybe they'll fall below that number. But, I mean, that makes sense. There are no teams in there that when you're on the road in the Big 12, you're thinking, okay, just chalk that one up as a win. And we saw that last year with Kansas. Bill Self had never been swept in the Big 12 until Oklahoma State last year, and Oklahoma State was a team that didn't even make the NCAA tournament. So when you're speaking to that, I think that's kind of something else you look at where, again, it's hard to measure teams. Some have 10 teams, some have 12, some have 16, but all you can do is all you can do, and the Big 12 really doesn't have a weak link, along with a lot of teams up there in the top 25-ish. I didn't want to get to the rest of the league because it's kind of fascinating to me. You have Kansas going 14-4, or your numbers have Kansas going 14-4 in the Big 12, and second place West Virginia going 11-7. That just seems about right to me. You know what I mean? Even if the Big 12 is good, even if Kansas loses 4, which I think a lot of fans would probably reject that notion right now because they think Kansas is preseason number 1. Even if all that happens, you're looking at KU with a 3-game margin just because the Big 12 most likely is going to eat its own again, and it's going to be very difficult to have a record much better than 11-7.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to like see, I don't think there's any like betting lines out there for like conference wins, and it would be great to have something like that because I don't. That's basically what I'm setting here is like an over under for wins. So even
Hmm.
though Kansas is the best team, like, or the computer thinks it's the best team, there's obviously some scenarios where they won't be as good. Maybe they'll end up being the 15th best team. I mean, that's not likely, but it's possible. And if that's the case, they could lose five or six in conference. Obviously, they could get through and lose one or two, or conceivably go undefeated. Although it obviously is very rare in a power conference, but Kansas has done it before. So uh, you know, I get the impression like my forecast is maybe like it could be slightly more aggressive. Like maybe the true over under for Kansas is three losses in conference or something like that. But I think once you get past Kansas, it is a little murkier. Like it's hard to have a whole lot of confidence in West Virginia or Kansas State or whoever you think is going to be the second best team in the conference. It's hard to have a lot of confidence that they're going to win like 13 games in league. I mean, I feel like 11 or 12 is pretty reasonable for whoever you think is the second best team right now.
Yeah, and the thing that doesn't go into account, which we've talked about so many years in a row, Ken, is KU just wins close games, and whatever you want to account that to, it's probably a little bit of everything. Allen Fieldhouse probably gives them a bump with fouls, and when the close games happen, they might get an extra call or two. Or Bill Self being a great end of game coach, or being able to draw up a play in a close game. All these things, you can add these little tiny things together. Maybe there's a little bit of a psychological edge when a team has won 10 in a row, or 11 in a row, or 12 in a row, or whatever the case may be. But whatever that is, KU seems to win more close games than you would expect, and that always seems kind of end up in the final projection number. Real quick, looking at the Big 12 up and down, I know one thing that's interesting: West Virginia ahead of Kansas State. I don't think that's something that many people would say. And then I think most people would have TCU as fourth. And they're down at sixth. There you have Kansas, West Virginia, K-State, Texas, then Iowa State. Texas Tech, TCU seventh, so TCU down at seven. Just a quick look at the Big 12. Anything stand out to you, Ken, or anything surprise you when the numbers popped out?
Not too much. I mean, so the deal with West Virginia is, like Kansas, they have an amazing baseline. Like, they might have the fourth or fifth best baseline in the country in terms of their performance over the last 3 years. So, even though they're replacing some guys and they obviously don't have like the big time recruiting class, like there's a pretty good track record there of them being good. And the computer's gonna give a team like that the benefit of the doubt when they're a Big 12 team especially, and they're not changing their coach, and they do have a few guys coming back. So that's part of the reason that they're ahead of Kansas State, who had a lot more room to basically make up. Even though Kansas State brings back almost its entire roster, like their baseline is much lower, and so that's the reason for that kind of flip flop there. But the rest of it, obviously Iowa State a little surprised, the 25th, and that seems like way higher than a lot of people have them. But overall, once you get past the top four or so, and you get to that Iowa State, Texas Tech, TCU area, like those teams are pretty similarly rated, and so the computer is basically saying any of those teams could be a tournament team, or they could drop out. I guess like one other point I want to make that I think is really instructive is that even though it says West Virginia's predicted for 11-7, like that's a different statement than the second place team is going to be 11-7. Like
True.
if we were doing something like that, we obviously would say that the second place team would be 13-5 or something like that, or 12-6, whatever it usually is. So it's just saying, hey, specifically West Virginia is going to be 11-7, and they that's basically because they could they could finish fifth or sixth. Like they're rated at a point where they could easily be second or they could be sixth, and they're going to be sixth. They're going to obviously be worse than 11-7. So again, it's just an over under for that team basically, and not saying the second place team will be 11-7.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you talked about, or we talked about earlier, kind of a range of outcomes thing. That's probably the most likely outcome based on your numbers, but yeah, could be 12-6, could be 13-5, and like you said, some of those other teams that are below them, if you win a close game, if you get a basket here, if you have a guy emerge, then you could find yourself 2 or 3 games better or 2 or 3 games worse on the other end, just depending on how the ball bounces. But you're also right, you also could see some separation just based on things happen. We saw Texas Tech briefly do that last year before a late injury to Keenan Evans. But yeah, still having said all that, it seems like Kansas the favorite. Kansas a significant favorite, and maybe even more of a favorite this year than some years past when we looked at it in the preseason and said, they got some work to do. At least they have a few challengers there. I think this one would be a real surprise if Kansas didn't win it. And I don't feel like I always feel that way or that the numbers always speak to that this early in the season. But this might be one of those years where Bill Self just has a team that is deep enough, talented enough that I think it really would be a huge surprise if someone seriously challenged Kansas in this league.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's been like previous years where you'll see previews and people will be like, "Yeah, I got to pick Kansas," and there's not really a lot of like great reasoning behind it. But this year, like you legitimately look at the rosters and the talent among the teams, and I think even if you just took the names off the jerseys, you'd still ultimately pick Kansas to win the title.
Hey, it's Blair Kirchhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass, unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town, just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass.
Okay, let's get into this, Ken. So when you come up with these, you kind of have an idea what's happening out. So at some point, I'm just envisioning you going through all these databases and everything, and then you click enter, and it gives you a list of numbers, and you're scrolling through. And then this is totally fictional, obviously. But when you get that first look at numbers and you see this final list, give me a couple schools, either high or low, that made you go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that," or "Oh my gosh, I'm going to hear from that fan base." I guess what were the surprises when you first saw this list?
So I think when I first ran this, really I started running it like at the end of March, and obviously there's some changes that happened to rosters over time, but the first thing that surprised me, I guess, was most surprising was Syracuse being number 8. Now, since then, it seems like people like pollsters have kind of come around to like Syracuse being really good this year. But at least when I first saw it, it seemed like they'd be like a borderline top 25 team, and 8 was a little bit lofty, and that was probably the one that jumped out at me. Certainly I think the difference in the SEC, just in general, like, having Kentucky at 7 and Tennessee and Auburn outside the top 10 is, generally lower than public perception. It's not completely out of line, but, those are some issues. Like Clemson at 14, like I don't, think people probably would balk at that. But I mean, overall, like, I'm one that does kind of get easily horrified by stuff my computer spits out,
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of my own harshest critic at times, but I was pretty happy basically with how the top 25 looked. There's some weird teams at the end of the top 25 maybe, but overall I felt like it was, pretty reasonable.
Any changes this year? I know you're constantly tweaking, or at least you're looking into the data and trying to look back and try to always improve. Is there anything major this year with the rankings that you tried to change up to make it better, or were things last year pretty good and you decided to kind of roll with it again?
Yeah, I thought they were pretty good. Obviously the big transition would be to go to like a completely player-based system, and I guess I'm just not convinced that that's like there's a lot of gain to be had there. So the effort required to do that, I think, is a little much for the potential reward involved. So we already got Bart Torvik out there who basically does the player-based ratings at this point. Dan Hanner, I guess, threw in the towel. But I'll just stick to kind of my hybrid model of some player information and some team information. And overall, I think it's a good enough starting point. It's going to miss teams that, so because there's so much inertia involved, like it's going to miss teams that could change a lot in a year. And there aren't many that do that. But there's a few, like Western Kentucky last year was a good example where, they didn't have the great baseline and they had a bunch of good players, but none that were like, nationally known impact players, no top 50 recruits, no big time transfers. And so their initial rating was, much lower than it probably should have been. But to me, there's like one or two, maybe three teams like that every year. And, the effort necessary to fix that, probably would create three or four or five or six other like big outliers. And so I'm pretty cautious at this point about, making significant changes.
All right. Well, Ken, I wanted to get back to some of the things I talked about. The one thing I think that should be of grave concern to KU fans, I went ahead and clicked on the committed users button, the link on your website. People can look up the most popular teams because once you sign up for kenpom.com, you can say, hey, I'm a fan of Kansas or Kansas State or whoever. And it's been a long time running that Kansas fans have sort of dominated this sort of aspect. They've been number one on your list. But I looked, and Kansas fans are number one at 4.9%, which is good. Virginia, 4.8%. So it's not really a huge surprise that Cavs fans are a fan of the tempo-free stats. I don't think at all. That would make their fan base very happy to look at those stats and say, hey, it's very efficient even with a slower pace. But I think Kansas fans are. Their lead is being cut. So I think that this is maybe the closest it's been in a while. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually have a secret for you here, Jesse. But Virginia actually was number one briefly, like sometime between like last selection Sunday and that first weekend of the tournament. Virginia did overtake Kansas, and I never really got the opportunity to make a big deal out of it for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Shortly after that first weekend, Kansas retook the lead and as maintained that slim edge throughout the offseason. But yeah, Virginia's close behind. If they have another solid season this year, there could be a change at the top. We'll have to see.
All right. Well, against $20 a year, you haven't charged me yet this year. You got me on auto pay, but $20 a year for the year on KenPom.com. Is that still right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's the same as it's always been. Yeah, hopefully, I think there's more stuff than there used to be. So I think it's a better value than it was last year or the year before. So yeah.
Well, let's get to that real quick. I know you're one of the big things on the site, and you really can't miss it. It's on the top bar, and I've been playing around with it a little bit, is the D1 Universe. Can you just speak briefly to what people can get with the D1 Universe and kind of the tool that it is for people that want to get a quick glance at some numbers?
Yeah. So, you go to my homepage and you see this like table of numbers, and it's fine. Like my entire site is table of numbers, and that's what it was built on, and it's great. But basically the D1 Universe is like this graphical interface that kind of shows the entire, all 353 teams this season, but whatever it is for previous seasons, shows those teams kind of where they are, ranked essentially, like in one view, like their offense and their defense. It's hard to explain because it's a visual application, but you can basically just like mouse over categories and see where everybody's ranked in certain categories or what their value was, and you can filter by conference and see kind of how the conferences are rated relative to each other. I think it's like just way more insightful than looking at a table of numbers in terms of getting an idea of where's this team rank, or in this in the case of the preseason ratings this year, just getting a visual on like how far Kansas is ahead of the rest of the country right now. Like you can just see that, and so that's kind of my new baby, and I'm going to try to hopefully build some things like that, just to give people an easier way to consume more information.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can see me doing this, but basically I can put my pinky between Kansas and Duke here on the D1 Universe when it comes to the adjusted efficiency margin. And I think if I put my pinky down again, it would be Duke and the number 13 team, which is, let's see, who's number 13 this year? Michigan State. So that just tells you how far KU is ahead of the pack when it comes to right now, and kind of speaks to exactly what you're talking about. If KU loses to Michigan State, they have built up enough lead in the Ken Pom measure that they are not likely to move down. So it's a good quick look at the numbers and gives you a better idea that, hey, the difference between 1 and 2, there actually is a difference. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all those teams are separated equally. So that's something you get on the site. I also want to talk about your podcast that you started up this summer. Can you tell me about it, and what was the idea for starting it, and why did you decide to get started there with Griffin?
Yeah, so I'm co-hosting a podcast with Griffin Adams, who's an editor at The Athletic, and basically it's just kind of another outlet for me to get some ideas out there. There's some things like that are just not easily like meant for writing a piece, writing an article, and there's some things that are just you need more time than Twitter, kind of gives you. So it's basically kind of an outlet for those kind of ideas, just kind of riffing on what's going on in the game and just, various things either analytically related or not. Obviously we're going to kind of skew towards talking about the numbers, but we're going to hopefully talk about them in more human terms, kind of like you do, Jesse. So that was basically the idea behind it. And, hopefully at some point during the season we can get you on once we figure out how to reliably have guests on the show. You're definitely going to be on our target list.
Oh, that sounds fun. Well, I'd love to be on, and I've loved it because I felt your pain. You were talking really interesting conversation. You were talking about one time where if a team only made like 2 threes or 2 twos in the first half, how likely would it be for them to win? And I felt your pain because so many times I'm sitting at my computer and thinking, I've got this great idea for a story. I'm going to do all this research, and it takes an hour, and I look everything up, and then the number I find is like not that interesting. You know what I mean? And so I was just like, oh, I'm feeling Ken's pain here because you were the same way. I think I don't remember the exact stat, but it was something like if a team made 2 2-point field goals in the first half, they still won the game. They still went like 8-41 or something, and you're like, wow, that's really disappointing. I thought they would all lose the games, but I could definitely feel your pain there, and that is what a podcast is good for. You can still give those numbers and surprise Griffin with the numbers, even though at least your work is being rewarded to look all that stuff up and not being wasted like it is so often with me at my computer.
Yeah. So that rose out of the UMBC Virginia game where UMBC had made two pointers in the first half, and I thought, man, like nobody wins doing that. And as it turns out, like, a third of the time a team wins or something like that. It was kind of crazy. So, anyway, that was fun. And, it's kind of what the podcast is about. It's not necessarily the deepest subject matter, but just some fun stuff that we come across. And there's always going to be a lot of that once the season gets started.
The only thing that killed me, Ken, was your guys disagreeing with the Elam Ending. That is, I am hashtag love Elam Ending over here. So I can hear your arguments. I can understand it, but man, I am ready for those end of games to go a little bit faster. And college basketball is not afraid to be different, that's for sure, with the 2 halves and everything. But I hear your point on nothing being better than a buzzer beater. But I do like the end of game. The only thing I can say about this, every game with a game-winning shot, I could definitely see a path where journalists like me would want to write about the game-winning shot like 95% of the time. You know what I mean? Like wouldn't that just be the inkling to be like, oh, they won by 4. Let's write about the game-winning shot when, the other 65 possessions were pretty important too. I could see that happening, but I still could see some positives from the Elam Ending. We'll see how far it goes, but I know you and Griffin talked about that and not being completely sold on that, which, again, it's good to get voices out there because, I don't like to only hear myself talk about these things, but I could definitely see it speeding up the end of games. There's got to be something done there just because of the fouling that goes on. Maybe there's nothing to be done. I don't know. But that just seems to me to be a big problem. Maybe it's a bigger problem in person than it is on television.
No. I mean, obviously when you're at home, you can change the channel, I guess, but it's, I'm with you on that. Like, I do think the end game is broken to some extent, and I'm totally open to like experimenting with different things. And I'm glad like the Elam Ending did get experimented with in the basketball tournament. I hope to keep using it. Like, I think it's great to kind of see how it plays out. But I was hoping I'd be won over by it, and I just couldn't do it, Jesse. I could not pull the trigger. I think there's got to be a different way. But I applaud the innovation, and I enjoyed the experimentation. I love tinkering with the rules. So it was worth a try, but I think there's got to be some other way to do it.
We'll agree to disagree on this one. It never happens, but we're going to agree to disagree on this one, Ken. Just because, I've written too many positive things about Elam Ending on Twitter to go delete them all. So it's too far down. It's too far down the road with that one. I want to get your thoughts on just some big topics going into the season. Any big picture things that you're looking at this year? Anything that interests you just from an overall college basketball perspective?
Well, I mean, I think, in the beginning of the season, I'm always interested to see what happens just like in the big picture of college basketball in terms of statistical trends, how the game is played. We've obviously seen, in the NBA, the opening week where scores have just been outrageously high. They obviously have a different thing going on there with the officiating kind of cracking down on freedom of movement, and that's partly fueled it. But it seems like teams are just more willing to play at a faster pace as well. And it'll be interesting to see if college mirrors that or not. So, certainly early in the season, seeing how that plays out, you know, I'm always worried about officials kind of being lax in the college game and it getting back to being more of a physical grind. We've obviously made a lot of progress getting away from that the last few years. So hopefully that continues, and hopefully we can see, the kind of shooting that we're seeing in the NBA and kind of playmaking. And I'm all in favor of higher scoring games, provided it's not because the defense is a farce, but because it's just players are better at making plays. And if that's the case, that'll be a lot of fun. So that's the first like 3, 4, 5 days of the season. That's what I'm always looking forward to, just running those numbers and seeing how those numbers compare to the first 5 days of the season last year or the year before, and seeing how things are shaking out.
I'm a little fascinated, and maybe this is just me being there in the moment for this game, but what Villanova did against Kansas and shooting so many threes, I mean, they did it all season, and they've been doing it for multiple years. But just to do it on such a big stage and be so successful with it, I know the three-pointers have increased the past few years, but it just makes me wonder. I've been reading stuff on Twitter about how Villanova in one of their secret scrimmages or whatever, they fired like 70% threes. It just makes me wonder, like, if we still haven't reached that breaking point with threes, just because I know Villanova is kind of their own beast, and Jay Wright has it rolling out there, and they've got the certain players to do it, all that stuff. But I just think that it seems like more and more and more that teams might just be open to this, because that the team that has the highest success in college basketball, they're bound to get copied. It seems like that's always the case.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a little weird because normally the very best teams in the country are not that three-point dependent. So Villanova was different, and I'm not convinced that they're going to necessarily set a trend. But as you say, that game against Kansas certainly, I think, turned some heads, not just the way it happened, but just how Villanova was seemingly so brazen about launching early shots in the shot clock. And that's what we're seeing in the NBA too. And, when you run analyses on shot selection and, when they occur in the shot clock, like invariably you find that passing up open threes early in the shot clock is a bad idea. Like, you are not going to get the value out of the possession that you think you are. And Villanova, I think, realized that last year. I mean, they obviously had the players that allow that to happen, but as more coaches, I think, become open to that, hopefully we do see the pace of the game increase just based on that fact alone. I mean, it's better basketball. Passing up that early open three, leading to some other kind of tough mid-range two at the end of the shot clock is not that always happens, but it happens a lot more than I think people realize.
I'm telling you, Ken, one team that played more that way is Kansas. You saw them against Duke, rushing down the court, shooting up early transition threes. Didn't make many of them, but they figured that was a good shot against an unset defense. And I'm convinced Kansas, for one, is one of those teams that you look at their 3-point rate recently. I mean, it has changed. This has changed college basketball. People getting more in tune with the analytics, the numbers, and I'm not sure it's even just a college basketball thing. I think it started to filter from the NBA a little bit. And if I'm being honest, as we're talking right now, the Dodgers and not the Astros, the Dodgers and the Red Sox are in the World Series, and you look at the final four teams in baseball, and all of them are pretty analytically minded and savvy. And just last night on Monday Night Football, you saw a team, the Giants. They went for 2, down 14 points after they scored a touchdown. And everybody's wondering, what are they doing? And the numbers make sense with it. So I think it is kind of crazy. It seems like it's accelerated, to me at least, over the last 5 years or so in almost all sports and almost all areas. It's almost that teams are realizing that if you don't do it, you're going to get left behind. And I guess I'll ask you, do you think it's been more accelerated lately, or is this maybe something that I'm just trying to pick up on because I've seen it a little bit more, or maybe it's just my own bias showing through that I think that this has kind of picked up a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like in baseball, I would agree, and I guess in football, I mean, that 2-point thing is it's only happened twice this year that somebody's
that's true,
gone for 2 in that situation. But in the previous history of the NFL, it only happened twice. So that's progress. I don't know. Like, I guess I need another year to see if what happens in college basketball. But certainly at the professional level, you're seeing like rapidly just like teams, avoid taking the mid-range shot, designing offenses that get you threes or get you stuff at the rim. And I mean, it's not like people think like the nerds are taking over the game, but it's not very nerdy. You just do an analysis and you find the times where guys took an open three early in the shot clock and see how many points they scored, and you find times where guys passed up a open three early in the shot clock and see how much they scored, and you're going to find out that the former scores more points than the latter. It's not like high level math or anything like that. It's just like detailed analysis that hadn't been done in the past for whatever reason.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch too, because there's different ways to win. And just 2 years ago, we saw a North Carolina team that shoots a lot of mid-range shots. They just filled up possessions. They don't turn it over, and they get a bunch of offensive rebounds. And I could see Kansas following a similar formula this year with, the Dedrick Lawson types, where you just shoot some mid-range, but if you get so many possessions, you get so many extra possessions, and don't turn it over, you can make that successful as well. So it is kind of fascinating to see all these teams on different levels. Real quick before you go, Ken, I have to ask you, more people from teams contacting you, fewer? How does that work out? Do you still consult for teams? How does that all work? How many teams or do a lot of people reach out to you during the course of the season?
Yeah, once the season gets started, I have people reach out, but it's really like this time of year, and people are contacting me and bouncing ideas off me. The consulting is pretty much like on an informal basis at this point. Just like any sort of like formal consulting just takes up a lot of time. And so it's difficult to kind of get into that with specific teams. But yeah, certainly like the informal consulting, we talked to 2 dozen coaches in the past couple of months. And, those are always interesting conversations. Like I feel like I usually learn more than the coach talking to me does. But yeah, it's a great time of year. And then, I get out to the practices for the local teams here. So it's, another form of interaction, kind of force myself on people. So yeah, so it's a good time of year. We've got all like kind of one last time, can catch our breath before the sprint starts.
All right. Before I let you go, Ken, one bold prediction, one bold proclamation, or one thing you would like the average college basketball fan to know as they enter the 2018-2019 season.
Is that like one? Are those one of each thing?
Oh no, you can do whatever. I'm giving you the final word on this one.
My bold prediction, man. I'm caught a little bit off guard here, but I will go with what's my bold prediction, Jesse? Give me some.
How about this? If you could have college basketball fans know one thing about the game or your site or how it's played or the numbers, what would you tell them?
I mean, the game is like better than it's ever been.
There you go.
I feel like, I always talk about that. So people have heard me talk about it before, then they've heard that. But I do also feel like the mainstream convention, depending, I guess, on the age of the person you're talking to, it feels like, people think kids don't know the fundamentals or they're out there showboating or this or that. And it's like they can't make a free throw or they can't make 3-point shots, not enough shooters. It's like you look at the numbers, man. It's like shooting is better than it's ever been. Like it's just better than it's ever been. Turnovers are fewer than they've ever been. You name it, whatever like aspect of the game you think would represent poor basketball is like better than it's ever been. So, there you go.
These guys are really good, is what you're saying. I mean, they are. They're really, really good, especially when it comes to shooting. And as you've shown over the years, the free throw percentages keep going up and up, and then the three-pointers, even though the volume goes up, the percentage goes up. And that's why I think we'll go to the FIBA line here pretty soon in college basketball, because these guys are getting too good. You got to move the line back, probably.
Yes, please move the line back. Yeah, I would be in favor of moving it back to the NBA line, honestly. Like when you see the kids that go to the NBA, and there's countless examples of guys who don't shoot the three much in college, and they go to the NBA, and as rookies they're shooting threes, or certainly in their second or third year. It's like these kids can easily make that transition, and I do think like shooting the 3-point shot should be a special skill. Like I don't think every team should have 5 3-point shooters. Like it just shouldn't be that easy to acquire good shooting, and so moving it back would make the the skill more special, and for the teams that do have those skills, it would create just like tremendous spacing, and their offense would benefit from it. So anyway, there's my pitch for moving the 3-point line back, but I'd settle for the FIBA line certainly. Until
then, Villanova will just keep hitching up 65% threes. Maybe now until then, we will see what happens. Well, thanks Ken for joining me. And again, KenPom.com, $20 gets you the whole site for the year. Check that out, and then the Ken Pom podcast. Available online, iTunes. It's great. Ken and Griffin starting that up, and I'm sure there'll be more episodes coming out as the seasons goes on, and as there's more to talk about, Ken. As you know, it's much better when there's numbers and games and things to talk about. So looking forward to that. So appreciate your time, Ken. Thanks for joining us, and good luck this season with going over the numbers, and hopefully for your sake, I will say this: KU at least beats Michigan State, so you can have the right number one team for at least a week.
Appreciate that, Jesse. That'll be the only game this year that I'm actually rooting for a winner.
All right, Ken, appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks again to everyone for checking out the SportsBeat KC podcast. Be sure to tune in for another episode next week.